Yo, have you heard of LinkedIn Learning? If you haven't, LinkedIn Learning is an American massive open online course provider. It provides video courses taught by industry experts in a variety of subjects. Now, why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because Living Corporate is in partnership with LinkedIn Learning to provide diversity, equity, and inclusion courses. Listen, if you're trying to be a better ally, you want to understand better diversity, equity, inclusion strategies, or you just want to learn how to be a better leader, you got to check out the courses on LinkedIn Learning. So check it out. You can do it one of two ways. You can click the link in the show notes, or you go to LinkedIn Learning and you search Living Corporate. Again, link in the show notes, or go to LinkedIn Learning and search Living Corporate. I'll see you over there.
Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to have everyone here. If you're here for the first time, I'd love for you to drop a word of hello in the chat. But welcome to this week's episode of the Access Point, hosted by Living Corporate. So let me tell you a little bit about about Living Corporate. And Living Corporate is a digital media network consultancy that's focused on workplace equity and inclusion. Living Corporate, it centers and amplifies Black and Brown voices in the workplace through digital media production and business-to-business consulting. The network offers a variety of programming. And tonight, as I mentioned, I'm just excited to have you here joining us for this latest installment of the Access Point. But I will hand it over to BG to tell us a little bit about the background of the Access Point and kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Absolutely. Well, the Access Point is a weekly webinar focused on preparing Black and Brown college students and early career professionals just as yourself for the workforce by having real, nuanced talks that they know they really need. And so our guest today is Reginald Benbow. And Reginald, please tell people about yourself and what do you do and why you're excited to be on this week's episode.
Yes, good evening, everyone, and thank you to Brandon and Julia for having me tonight. So I'm really excited to be here. So I have two very big responsibilities right now, in addition to my day job of being a transformation consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I'm also a candidate for the Maryland House of Delegates in the Democratic primary for the 2022 election. So when you think about having to build and manage relationships across many different sectors, across many different industries, especially in terms of politics and doing it in an authentic way, very excited to share my experiences.
All right,
and I am based out of Baltimore, in case anyone is wondering.
And I know we talked a couple of days ago about all the many jobs that you've had, many career paths that you've had. Can you please expound on what you've been doing before you got into politics?
Yes, and so I think about sort of the moments that matter and the inflection points. So just over 10 years ago in August 2011, after graduating from college in 2011, I started my career as a teacher through Teach for America. And so I taught 6th and 7th grade science at a middle school in Baltimore City. So I was a teacher for 3 years. While teaching, I also earned a master's in education from Johns Hopkins University. And then I was at a career crossroads into my 3rd year of teaching where I thought, hey, I'm either going to go into school leadership. I thought about changing, secondly, into maybe a different content area. I was elementary certified, so I thought about going down to 4th or 5th grade. And then thirdly, I thought about, expanding my impact beyond the classroom and moving into graduate school, and thought about public policy law or business school. And so this all happened very fast as I realized, I want to leave education on a high note because it is very tough. And so I was approaching burnout. And so I decided to pursue option 3, which was graduate school, and chose to earn an MBA, which I thought would give me the most flexibility without locking me in to, just public health or public policy. But could go into so many different industries with an MBA. And so I went to the Duke School of Business, and for my MBA summer internship, I still rave about it. I still try to buy their products. I was a marketing intern with General Mills, the maker of Cheerios and Tostinos and Green Giant. And so my summer internship, I was helping to do Annie's soups and Tostinos and Green Giant. It was very fun, but you have to think about, people, place, and your projects that you're working on. And I enjoyed it, but I didn't like Minneapolis, and so I decided that I wanted to pursue other options. And so I took an offer to go to California. So talk about place. I said, let me really expand my horizons, and went to work in the leadership development program at Blue Shield of California. And so was doing something completely new, how to improve the customer experience in terms of claims operations and customer experience call centers. And from there, I went to Kaiser Permanente, an integrated health plan, very big in California, as well as some parts of the East Coast, and did that for another year. And after having these internal consulting roles, I, talk about relationships, had some very good, for my MBA and also for my Teach for America network, had some relationships with the consulting companies, people that I knew. And so, hey, I reached out to my network and said, this is the type of work that I've been doing. Do you think it would be a good fit? And they said, of course, yes, because all of the consulting companies have a big sort of healthcare practice, especially Deloitte, which is where I ended up at that time, and was, doing human capital consulting in the healthcare space, plan provider and pharmaceutical companies. And then a couple years ago, almost 2 years ago, moved over to PwC, where I continue to do the same type of work in the context of COVID-19 as well, which was so very interesting, working for a healthcare client and then having COVID hit, and then sort of a scramble and a pause, and then sort of a slowly back to normal. And now for the last year, really, while simultaneously while having a day job, thinking about running, really being inspired by the events of the summer of 2020 and George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and also in 2015, the Freddie Gray incident in Baltimore, which, definitely changed the trajectory of Baltimore as well, and realizing that, as Barack Obama said it, we are the ones that we've been waiting for. And public leadership, I think, is just as important as private sector leadership. And so stepping up to the plate in terms of politics. So that has sort of been, sort of the moments that matter in that journey there.
Yeah, that's a very extensive journey that you went through.
Yes.
So what I wanted to talk about mainly was like your political career, and especially cultivating those relationships, right? Because I know in the political atmosphere, you have to talk to people and glad hand and smile and, and really talk to, so maneuver around so you can really expand your network, right? So one of the questions that I have is, how often do you reach out to actively cultivate your network?
That is an excellent question. And it should be organic and natural and happening along the way. And so one thing that I saw that when I was a teacher was that, some of the teachers, especially the ones that had families, although we were working together and saw each other on a daily basis, they sent out a Christmas or a holiday card. And you used to put that in everyone's mailbox, although, hey, we're working together with professionals, but that was still cultivating their network in the moment that mattered, the holiday season. And so I really let that stick with me and thought about, what do people care about? They care about themselves. So I have for a very long time, I made it a point to, on LinkedIn and Facebook, when it's somebody's birthday, just to say happy birthday. I feel like people remember that, especially as, posting and messages become more and more infrequent. Also, letting people know when you have major updates in your life. I know some people consider, oh, maybe it's braggadocious, but hey, if you just post something on Facebook or LinkedIn, or any of the social medias that you use, and let people know what's going on in your life and interact with them, and say thank you, and respond to their messages, that goes a long way. And especially thinking about other people's interests and what's going to motivate them. So, for instance, last year there was a lot of course, activism in terms of education as well, and teachers are going through it during the COVID-19 pandemic, and so I knew that as a teacher. Hey, it would be good, for Donors Choose, which is a website, just donate to their projects, send them encouraging messages. One thing that I did recently was to organize a drive of what I call COVID-19 school supplies. So like you always needed them, but hand sanitizer and tissues and the rest. But hey, especially nowadays when people are wearing masks and people are wearing masks, that went a long way to just, hey, it could seem, oh, well, he's only doing that because he's, running for office. But no, people, especially the teachers who received that, they loved it. The school loved it because it's still speaking to their self-interest. It's not me just, hey, yeah, let me ask you to do something for me right now, but let me do something that you're interested in. And then eventually, of course, we can have conversations down the line as well.
Now, when you talk about, go ahead, Julia. Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to pop in here and just ask a follow up because you talked about some of these actions where you're making things happen kind of organically and naturally and so forth. But my question is, how do you get around, like, especially when you talk about life events or updates where it's like, hey, happy birthday or congrats on the promotion? How do you make yourself stand out and not seem like super cheesy or that the response is canned in some way? It's like, because everyone's hitting the happy birthday button or the congratulations button, right? So how do you stand out and not just kind of get lost in that kind of pack of people who are just doing what seems cheesy?
Yes, that is a great point. And so what I do, especially on LinkedIn, where it's very obvious, like when somebody is just hitting like the congratulations button, tailor it. Come on, it only takes 3 seconds to say congratulations, Jane, good job. Give it a little bit of extra special, a little bit of extra customization. And also don't necessarily do it for everyone. I think one thing that has stuck with me is especially from my teaching days, is to create a backwards plan. I mean, it's sort of obvious. You start with the end goal in mind, and then you work your way backwards. So let's say if you want to use this, you're in college and you're studying politics and you want to land a job on Capitol Hill. Maybe if we're going to use your limited time, you don't need to send greetings and salutations to everyone, but maybe to the people that work in politics, which is just going to be a limited number of the people that you're connected with. And then it knows how to focus your networking and relationship building. And so similarly, over the past year, when I knew that I was, embarking upon this journey, I laser-like focused a lot of my network and relationship building with people in the Baltimore area, which isn't necessarily a lot of people who are connected to my industry, and also where I went to school, because I went out of state, undergrad, went to college, went to Carolina. So most of those people sort of live in other places who I would be connected to on LinkedIn, and then some of the social media channels. So when it came to Baltimore specific folks, I knew that, hey, I need to give them a little bit of extra love and attention because I had that backwards plan in mind of like, hey, I'm going to be running in Baltimore. I need to have strength in Baltimore connection. People in New York City and even Washington and DC. And yes, to the point, always start with the end in mind, just so that you have a guiding compass. And I've taken the approach, like you would do for any type of, is create some guiding rules. Like, what do you care about? Maybe it's not, even, of course, is very sort of the low hanging fruit. It could be the birthday stuff, or maybe it is, hey, when you see that someone has like, I'm kind of, weird with like when it has loss and sympathies and condolences, but hey, maybe you can be like the consoler and the consoler and comforter in chief when it comes to people who you really care about, as well as thinking about um, and talking about starting with the end in mind. I think we'll get to this, but I learned a principle a few years ago of like the 2-hour job versus like, and what I literally had to do, you do in politics, is you map out everyone you know. And so I thought about that in terms of politics. Who do I know at the teachers' union? Who do I know that's related to healthcare? Who do I know that's related to police and public safety, and so forth and so forth. So you think about, and something that we did, especially in the MBA recruiting process, is, hey, if I'm interested in brand management, let me think about the companies that I would want to apply to, Kraft, Kellogg, P&G, Dr. Pepper, Snapple Group, etc. And then who do I know at those places? So you're not just, reaching out to folks randomly, and then you're being more targeted and tailored. And also, a lot of it comes down to preparation, because of course you want to do things to get you in the room, but then once you're in the room, set up your Google alerts for the things that you're interested in. You don't want an alert just for marketing, and that would probably get you all types of stuff. But hey, I want a Google alert for brand management, in terms of athleisure. So I know that, hey, I'm targeting Under Armour and Nike and Adidas. Those are my targets. So that's where I need to be researching. That's where I need to be networking.
So I do have another follow-up question. I wrote it down, right? So when Julie was talking about, sending messages for the birthdays and for other accomplishments, right? And that's well and fine. But my question is, when do you contact the network outside of those normal items? Besides the birthdays, besides the congratulations on your 2-year work anniversary, right?
Yeah.
When do you talk to this not just for networking, for networking, but geared more towards college students, right? So how often do you think these people should be actively talking to that network? Should it be once a day, once a week, once a month, once every 6 months, once a quarter, once a year? Like, how often should it be reaching out to that network?
Excellent point. I would say once a quarter, and I think you need to be mindful of, again, what are sort of the goals that you have in mind, and where are you in your process? For example, if you are, let's say, a freshman, maybe it's not that important. Maybe once every 6 months, because usually you don't get the high value internships, that you're still sort of fresh in your career, versus, hey, a spring semester junior and fall semester senior, and spring semester senior too. Like, this is heavy recruiting season, for the last internship round, and also graduating soon with a full-time offer. So it might be expected more that, hey, let me just have some reach outs and networking conversation. One thing I love it, and I really don't see it enough, are, college age folks reaching out with just like, hey, let me learn about what it is that you do, versus, I have this, interview in 2 weeks. Let me, that's fine too, but that seems like kind of late. Like, hey, we could have had a conversation before that, and also keep in touch. The importance of following up. So few people do that, and in my lines of work, I sat on interview panels and interview committees, and I was quite shocked at the small number of people who sent a follow up. And I know it sounds cheesy and everyone says it, but the people who did send a follow up, really sort of stood out, especially if it, was done, let's say within a timely manner. So think about, what do you sort of need that relationship for? Hey, are you just trying to get connected, or are you really going to ask them to do something? So if you're really going to ask them to do something, it probably needs to be more frequent. If it's more of just general knowledge and sort of relationship building, then I would say less frequent, as well as, maybe you really hit it off, and maybe this person could be an informal mentor, a formal mentor, even a sponsor for you throughout your process. And so then you would gauge it and keep in touch on a more regular basis.
All right.
So I just wanted to pop in here because first things first, that was great. A great interview tip for everyone who's listening. If you are interviewing, you should be sending a thank you or a follow-up note, ideally within the first 24 hours after your interview is completed. Don't wait a week to then say, hey, remember me from last week and that time? The person probably had 10 or 12 interviews since then, and you may have faded. So ideally within the first 24 hours is when you should reach out.
Absolutely.
But Reginald, I have a burning question, because you talked about the importance of follow up and maintain the relationships. Here's this question I got to ask you. So what happens if you're that person that doesn't follow up, right? Like the relationships go cold, months and months have gone by. A quarter has turned into like 4 quarters. It's now the same quarter in the following year, right? And so my question to you is, what do you do when your relationships have gone cold and you have not done the follow-up? They missed the access point episode where we talked about the importance of follow-up, and now all the relationships have gone cold. What do you do to kind of re-engage your network without seeming like an opportunist, kind of, hey, big head, I need something from you, kind of, kind of reach out. So what are your thoughts about trying to re-engage your network?
Yes, that is a great point. And I think people can, just as in dating, they sense the, sort of inauthenticity of the, hey, big head. So I was actually in a situation, and talk about a year, where, especially with me, I had a sort of a mentor from undergrad, and this person is sort of a big time player in the Baltimore legal scene. So of course, like, he's a partner at a law firm. So you think in terms of politics, wow, they can really introduce me to a lot of people. They're very, well known in sort of those legal circles. They could, even, lead to being a financial donor, introducing me to others. But with me moving across the country and things like that, we have sort of lost touch. And then I found an in is that, hey, like, I remembered where he worked. I'm like, and after about 5 or so years from our last conversation, I said, hey, dude, not using their name, but, hey, dude, my company's office is actually in the same building. Do you still work there? Let's grab coffee. And so I was like, it's had really been at least 5 years. And I think they were pleased with that. They responded. Now, we weren't able to meet up that time because, like I said, very busy attorney, but at least that re-sparked the relationship after several years of being dormant. Another tactic that I have been doing recently is sending people articles that I know that they may be interested in. So, one of my friends who I went to Fuqua with is I saw on LinkedIn that they were trying to start a cannabis business, and they're a black man as well. So, the idea that, black people have been disproportionately hurt by, of course, mass incarceration and marijuana being illegal. And now it's very few of cannabis businesses are owned by black people. So you see this, unevenness, and we were mass incarcerated for something that is now legal, but now we're not reaping the legal benefits of this. And quite frankly, yeah, I want this person to be a support of my campaign. And so I, sent them this article, said, hey, you should check this out. And it was about sort of the inequities in the cannabis industries and how people are working to correct that. And then for me sending that to him, he said, yo, dude, this is exactly what I wanted. In my area, I see that, most of the owners of the cannabis businesses are not black. So, really appreciated this. And then that led to he and I having a longer conversation on the phone later on. And again, like he and I really hadn't spoke since 2016. And so that was just recently. So I always think, what is going to spark the conversation besides, hey, let me just, reach out. What is their interest? What's going to motivate them to have a conversation, and be open to having a conversation, be open to even engaging with you. Besides just, yeah, like, hey, can you give me a referral? And I had that happen recently where this guy, we went to college together and we lived in the same dorm freshman year. So, like we, had that shared experience, so, and it was like, and, he sent me like a cold LinkedIn message like, hey, can you, would you mind giving me a referral to PwC? And I still did it. But, and, he sort of, put in like, Johnson dorm, 2007. I was like, okay, I feel like, some people, me being nice, you sort of get that one trump card. Sorry to use the word Trump, but that one, get out of jail free card where hopefully, but it should be based on something like that. It shouldn't be, oh, let me just do the brother man, because we're both black or something like that. Like, no, you have to find a better connection. So maybe it was good on his part that he did, like, casually include, like, freshman year dorm, because, we do forever have that bond, years and years later.
So I do have a question for you, Reginald. Okay, so I'm a college student, just not graduating, right? Get into the workforce. I don't know anything. I don't know anybody. I'm fresh. How do you start networking? Where do you start?
Don't know anything. That's a tall order, but hey, that's so many of us. I was definitely in that situation as well. I was telling someone recently that, I'm a first generation college graduate, so I and my parents didn't have the context of, hey, you have to network to build jobs. Somebody taught me that, and so their idea was like, hey, yeah, you just apply for it online, like you would do with, Sears or Kmart and things like that back then. But that's not how you should, go about finding employment. So, and again, I think we already sort of touched on it, but even before you start with the backwards plan, you need to reflect. And I think, and I'm glad we're called this cultivating authentic relationships, because you need to reflect and think about who you are as a person. How do you show up? And then what is it that you want to do? But I think having the authenticity of who am I and how do I show up? What's a good environment for me? Um, and then what is it that you want to do? I think is really about 70% of it, especially due to the social media world that in which we live in. People value authenticity. We can spot, when something is off kilter. Like me, hey, it may be, for better or for worse. Like I'm not, a sort of Bernie, Sanders, type. I'm, in terms of presentation, like, sort of conservative. I'm not just going to be like, all crazy. Like I like to be presentable. I'm fine with a sort of like business, professional attire. But what if you're like a much more casual type of person? You enjoy creativity. Then hey, trying to go into the business world could be difficult. Also, and so think about that. Who you are, how do you show up, um, and what is it that you want to do, and then from there, I would say start really 2 to 3 years out. One thing that I like to do, you know, maybe because I'm this crazy person, is think about sort of my 5 year plan. But, even just 2 to 3 years out, what is it that you want to be doing? And then start with there. So, hey, in 2 to 3 years, if I want to be, let's just say, a user experience designer for one of the FANG firms, hey, then there's probably certain experiences that I need to be doing now. I probably need to, gather some type of research experience and undergrad, maybe need to take these certain classes, and then need to be making these certain type of connections that will get me to being in user experience.
But
Right?
so,
Mhm.
not to cuff your list, but like more specifically, right? So if I'm fresh into the workforce, right? Should I start on LinkedIn to make my connections,
Oh, okay.
Twitter, Facebook? Should I reach out to my social circles first just to start building it? Like, where should I start when building these types of relationships?
Yes. So that is a good point. So you always want to sort of a personal introduction. You want people to vouch for you. So I would say start with your personal network. And for those of us, hey, it may be smaller or larger than others, but instead of, cold calling, it's always best to start with some type of introduction, even if it's a second or third degree instead of a first degree introduction. And then from there, again, I don't know everything. Some industries really aren't on LinkedIn, but if you're doing something that's more traditional where they are, then yeah, then you should at least have a profile and be cultivating and posting. Maybe, hey, if you're doing something techy or more creative, maybe it's Twitter or Instagram where people can spot you. Or if you're really artistic, maybe it's TikTok, and those types of things that I'm not really comfortable with. But whatever it is, you should be consistent. And as I have learned very recently, you have to try to beat the algorithm. So no matter what, these platforms, hey, like you kind of already can tell, you log into any of them, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. You don't see a thing order things are engaging with. Host stuff in order to be considered relevant. And so that think about who you are and what you care about. Are engaging in these activities, it could be things that's actually true to who you are as a person and not just what you think you should be doing, what you think you should be doing or engaging with. Even now, in terms of, for me, there's so many things that I could be commenting on as somebody who's running for public office, especially, I'm sure nobody's stupid. So you may have heard that Baltimore has, supposedly a crime issue, and public safety is top of mind for some people. And that's very true. Some people focus on that, but I don't like to focus on those negative stories. I like to focus on the things that are important to me. Also, like, nobody is going to believe that, I'm the cop and tough on crime, because that's not authentic to who I am as a person. I am definitely for the reform, deconstruction, whatever, of the police. I'm not, saying let's have more police. So I focus on the things that are important to me, healthcare and education, and that are important to so many different people. So in that way, know your lane and stick to it. And of course, your lane can change over time, but you really want to come across as authentic by engaging in ways that are true to who you are.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think that you make a really good point there in talking about being true to who you are, because especially in light of social media, there's so much out there that is impressing upon you to be a different version of yourself. And so you're trying to be whoever you need to be in order to get attention. But it sounds like the way to really begin networking and building authentic relationships is for you yourself to first be authentic. And that way it can hopefully connect with people. And I guess that's a follow-up question I would have for you, is that especially when you get into politics, I feel like there's a lot there for you to be a different version of yourself. And so I guess, how do you keep bringing yourself back to being authentic? Because there's a potential for more people to like you if you take this position or that position. And so for college students, if they feel like, well, hey, if I'm this version, maybe more companies will like me, or if I'm this version, I can fit into this group of, of colleagues. So how do you keep pulling yourself back to being authentic and not worrying about, hey, I'm not going to get as much attention?
Oh my Lord, that is, always top of mind. And at least for me personally, I have made a conscious effort to list out my values and guiding principles of me, my campaign, the community, as well as the city. And, for each of the 4 areas, they're slightly different, I think, as they should be. And I, have that in my strategy deck, and I refer to that on a weekly basis to know, hey, even when it comes to going to events, where am I going to spend my time? Like, I have to go where it's based with the values of me and my campaign. And that's a good point that I meant to bring up earlier too, is we can't forget the importance of, when it comes to relationships, of going to events. So many of them have been virtual over the last year, but more and more are coming into person. And so, the networking, happy hours, the industry specific events, even the Zooms and virtual meetings, I think, some of them are better or attended than others, which, can be interesting, but the ones that are smaller can be interesting too, because it allows you more face time. And so don't be afraid to do and participate events and go to festivals. Even in my line of work now, politics, like, going to events has been a great way to network and build relationships, especially whether it was virtual or in person, but tailored around a specific topic. So I definitely agree with that. It's time to get back outside. And then another thing that has helped me to think about, even in terms of that, like, hey, you could go to anything, is thinking of the limited resources, because as we all know, time is the most precious resource. It is the only thing that we can never get more of. money, etc. You could always get more of that, but time is fleeting. So think about, time management as in school and work. When it comes to relationship building, I think time management is key, and you have to, know when to cut it off and cut your losses. Think of it as a sunk cost, like in me, even now, maybe, hey, like right now, quite frankly, I spend a lot of time doing what in politics we call call time, which is, calling people up, especially that and saying, hey, can you get involved? And hopefully, these conversations, should be short. Some of them are longer than others. But if it's not working, you kind of have to, cut it off and move on. So definitely in terms of relationship building, don't put too much effort into something if you're not getting any return from it.
All right. So I do have a question for you, right? Okay. It'll sound kind of weird, but it's going to make complete sense when I say it, right? So we talked about networking. We talked about making these authentic relationships with people that we don't know, especially outside of our circle, right? So I'm an introvert. How does that work out when you're an introvert trying to make these connections to people that you don't even know?
Hey, I'm an introvert too, and in a very strong, and if you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs, I am INTJ, so not only but intuitive as well. So and just a very sort of logical person, so not the T and J part of it, so not like the sensing feeling. What is the opposite? Like ESP something, I don't know.
I forgot the letters now.
But when you're committed to something and when it's important, you have to engage in it. And I think you may be better at it in some ways because you do know that it may not be your first choice to do that. But when you think about how can I grow my career, how can I grow my network, and you know that it's something you have to do, I think necessity, is the root of all innovation. And so what I like to do for that is to schedule it out and adhere to my calendar, speaking of our conversation about time management. So I have a dedicated time where I go to campaign events. I have a dedicated time where I do fundraising. I also have a dedicated time, especially as an introvert, where you have to recharge and be solo and have solid time and have thinking time, have time to make those connections, especially when you shouldn't just go out and talk to as many people. No, you should go out, talk to who you need to talk to, build relationships, and then think about it. And hey, write stuff down, make connections. It's like, okay, maybe, I learned tonight that, Mary Ann, going back to our user experience example, once had a project where she did X, Y, and Z. I really have an interest in that. So maybe I should follow up with her about, hey, how did you break into that project and what was that experience like? And that's, fodder for your next conversation. And so it's not just like, hey, Marianne, can you give me a referral? And so it will be just like, hey, yeah, like this kid is asking for a referral. Let me do the standard referral form on Workday that goes into a black hole. But it's like, okay, instead, because you really built an authentic relationship with her, then it's like she emails the recruiter directly.
Awesome. So we've talked about a lot here tonight, and so as we think about kind of giving a summary to the folks who are listening, or the person who was multitasking and they're now only tuning in for real at these last few minutes here. If you had kind of just a top 3 tips of all the things that you've shared tonight, or your top 3 tips, Reginald, if we think about for college students who need to network, what are the top 3 things that you would leave with them to say, if you want to build authentic relationships and network organically, what would be the top 3 things you'd share with them?
Yes, and thanks for the opportunity to recap. So number 1, is reflect. Think about who you are and how you show up and what it is that's important to you. So I think in order to be good at anything, you always have to start out with reflection. And then secondly, you should never start anything without a game plan. Like always start with the end in mind and work your way backwards, whether that's packing for a trip. You think about, how am I going to pack this suitcase? To think about, hey, how do I get an internship? How do I get a job offer? You always start with the end in mind and work your way backwards. And then thirdly, just do it. Like, I feel like, what's the saying that, again, sorry, Trump is in my mind. Trump once said, to black voters, what the hell do you have to lose?
Right.
So literally, what the hell do you have to lose by reaching out to someone, by saying happy birthday, by sending an article to someone, by asking for help, and reaching out, again, as we sort of said, start with who you know and work outwards. So you start with the people who are closest to you, people who you have in your phone, and that if you call them, they will respond. And then you go out to an outer circle, and then you do the people who you have some common interest with. School alumni. Some of y'all are the Black elite, so maybe y'all were in Jack and Jill and all that type of stuff. Then you go to your Jack and Jill and your fraternity and sorority folks who, they don't know you personally, but they have an association with you. And then you go out then you go to the next level, which are the allies of the people that you're associated with. So, the highest return is always going to be from that closest in circle. And then, of course, diminishing returns as you go further and further out from your network.
Awesome. And so I just want to say thank you for not to sound like Clubhouse here, but thank you for dropping these gems on us. Honestly, had to use the Clubhouse one. But Reginald, thank you so much. I mean, what I loved the most about what you just said was really about just doing it. We just, at some point you just gotta go for it. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you for everyone who was listening tonight. Hopefully you got something from this conversation. Our guest host, Reginald Benbow, who has shared so much knowledge with us. Hopefully you took some notes. And before we wrap up, I wanted to talk about our Thursday show that's coming up, which is a new installment of The Access Point with Dr. Lonnie Morris, Dr. Wendy M. Edmonds, and Dr. Deborah Hunter Johnson, who will get into discussions that are targeting early career professionals. So this week, especially, they're going to talk about your personal board of directors. And so I want you guys to hopefully tune into the show on Thursday as well. And so, BG, you have some more info for us in terms of socials?
Yeah, sure. You can follow Reginald Benbow at www.reginaldbenbow.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Reginald Benbow, LinkedIn /Reginald Benbow, Instagram Reginald.Benbow, all the socials, right? You can follow us on LinkedIn at Living Corporate Network. At Living Corporate. Follow us on Twitter at LivingCorp_pod, the website at livingcorporate.tv, and on Instagram at Living Corporate. You can also follow myself on Twitter at Ghostface Sigma. And Julie, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram and Twitter at the Julia Rock, or you can follow my company Rock Career Development at Rock Career on Twitter and Instagram at Rock Career. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. And thank you again, Reginald, for joining us this evening.
Yes, thank you both for having me and for everyone for participating. This was a great conversation. Looking forward to more.
And we will see you guys next Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Next Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. With that being said, we'll see you guys then.
See you guys.
Have a good evening.